You know, this is the first piece of clothing I've ever bought for myself.
That?
Yeah, you don't like it?
Is that like an army surplus? Or?
Okay, it has a lot of pockets. But I use them all the time, and I made some of my own modifications. Well,
Yeah.
never. Shut up. The point is, I've never had control over my own life before, and now I do. I want to do things.
I like your vest.
God, I knew it. I knew you did. It's so cool, right?
It's good. Yes.
And you can put so much stuff in there. You wouldn't even know.
Hey, I'm Derek,
And I'm Noah, and you're listening to A Bite Up.
where we take our current favorite pop culture obsession and enjoy it one nibble at a time.
We were laughing because the theme song plays before we go in, but my computer was way too loud.
Sometimes it's just a whisper.
Yeah, and we're in a hotel recording this, and it was very loud. So if you hear somebody knocking at the door telling us to be quiet, that's why.
We're getting in trouble for you. Disrupting the hotel for you. We heart you guys.
So, welcome to this bonus episode of A Bite Of, where we're talking about the long awaited release of Black Widow. And I will say it's probably even longer because this movie should have came out a long time ago.
Exactly. It's not only long because we were supposed to get it during quarantine craziness, but it's just long because why the hell did it take this long for Black Widow to get her own GD movie?
She had to die to get her movie.
Rudeness. That is sexism. In Marvel, they're like, yeah, we'll give her one when she can't have any more.
Yeah. Needless to say, we were very happy that this movie finally came out. And I'm sure many other people were.
We recently took a trip. We literally saw it the night before we went on the trip.
To Colorado.
To
right.
Colorado. Yeah, we barely packed. We were like, we got to see Black Widow.
Yeah, we saw it Thursday night, and then we were like, oh, we have a early flight.
Did
Friday.
we do laundry?
Who cares?
We're toiletries.
Who cares? Before we get into talking and dissecting this Black Widow, make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at @BiteOfPod. Check out our Patreon, where we have bonus episodes, exclusive bonus episodes. I know this is a bonus episode, but we have other bonus episodes.
Bonuses on top of bonuses.
I'm just trying to see how many times I could say bonus in
Bonus.
one sentence. And we're also on Apple subscriptions. So if you don't want to join our Patreon and it's just easier for you to go on Apple Podcasts and join the subscription that way, you get bonus stuff there.
And if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts, give us a review and those 5 stars. All right. Of course, guys, there's going to be spoiler alerts here. We're talking about the entire movie. So things might be spoiled, definitely. So let us officially take a bite of Black Widow.
Whee!
So when I dive into any Marvel property, I like to do a little bit of research in the comic area. I am lucky enough that I live with a human Marvel DC comic encyclopedia. Don't want to know Noah Zacharias sitting across from me.
Hey, don't say my whole name. How dare you? Now people can find me.
So let's talk a little bit about the comic history of our one and only Black Widow. So going by many aliases like the Russian Avenger, the Slavic Shadow, the Red Death, Femme Fatale, and more, Natalia Romanova, aka Natasha Romanoff, is more commonly known to the masses as Black Widow. She first appeared in the April 1964 issue of Tales of Suspense number 52, titled Iron Man, the Crimson Dynamo Strikes Again.
If you haven't noticed a pattern with most of these Marvel characters, they premiere in like Tales of Suspense, Journey into Mystery. They don't technically have their first comic right away, which I think is really interesting. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like it. It was sort of like these collected works, and then when they became really popular, they got their own runs.
Yeah.
So she started off in one of these. So in this particular issue, Natasha is paired up with the strong brute Boris, and the pair are sent from Russia to take down the Russian traitor Vanko, the New York playboy Anthony Stark, and that pesky hero Iron Man. Because obviously they don't know that Stark and Iron Man are the same person.
Also, they're calling him Anthony, so.
Oh, yeah. I loved that. I grabbed onto that young Anthony Stark. Ooh,
Nope.
that playboy.
I think a lot of people forget that I mean,
Tony.
yeah.
Right.
Tony is from Anthony.
Anthony. Yep.
Like me, I don't think
And
it's
his
from
offices were like in Flushing, Queens or something like that.
that. He wasn't that rich.
But it's just funny. It's just like, we see him in like these big skyscrapers and
Right.
stuff now, but like his offices in the original comics were in Queens.
Yep.
Sort of like our, where Spider-Man is from. Black Widow, decked out in a green jacket, skirt, and veil, mind you, is there to distract young Tony. She does this by going out on a date with him. While not the most action-packed first appearance, she gets a featured spot on the cover, and her legend grows from there. Her backstory starts when just before a building is set ablaze, a woman hands infant Natasha over to Ivan Petrovich, who raises her as his own. Later, she is trained as an assassin and spy and used by the Russian government. At one point, she is given a super soldier serum variant that slows down her aging. Through many trials and tribulations, she ends up joining S.H.I.E.L.D., the Champions, and of course, the Avengers. In the comics, Black Widow has been romantically linked to the Red Guardian.
Gross.
Yeah, really gross. Hercules, Hawkeye, Tony Stark, Bucky Barnes, and Daredevil.
Stony Tark.
Stony Dark, my boy. She has also been decked out in many costumes, from the aforementioned green two-piece suit to a blue bodysuit over a fishnet catsuit to the sleek gray, white, or black suits we know so well today. In many comic appearances, Black Widow can be seen trying to right the wrongs of her past and atone for her former sins when she was under Russian control.
Right. That's the biggest through line with Black Widow that they did well in the MCU is she's always trying to right her wrongs in the past. Be that she did it kind of willingly and then found a better way, or she was brainwashed and wants to atone for that. So I did like that they kept that with the MCU. And the most interesting thing about this character is in the MCU, we know nothing about her. We know that, she's Black Widow, and that means that she was a, ex-KGB assassin. And that's really it. She did some terrible things, and we've heard some snippets throughout these 10 years with her. But really, she's just always seemed so, I don't want to say solemn, but she always seems very level-headed almost, and is very to the point.
Right.
We see a bunch of these other characters. I mean, she's standing next to Stony Tark.
Stony.
And, the Hulk and all these people being goofy and stuff. And she can be goofy too, but, we don't really see that side of her. She has been a supporting character, unfortunately, through this entire thing, even though she's one of the original, 6 members of the team.
Yeah. And I think what was great about reading some of these comics is that I really got to see her struggling with some of these inner demons. Whereas we have to guess that there's things going on below the surface of Black Widow in the MCU. When you read the comics, you really gotta get to see her inner monologue and what's going on there. So it's nice where we get this movie, Black Widow, and we kind of get to dig a little deeper into her past and see what has built her up to become who she is today.
Yeah, it was always so interesting because I feel like she does have a lot of characters in her comics and story. You can kind of assume or piece together oh, maybe she just felt like killing was wrong and didn't want to do it. But as we see with the Black Widow movie, it's a little deeper than that. And what had happened is a lot more serious than what we were led to believe almost. Yeah. All right. So to the movie at large, I do like seeing box office earnings for movies because, especially a movie I really like or I'm interested in, I'm like, how well did it do? Did people go see it? Well, apparently people really went to go see this movie because it got 80 million in the domestic box office. That's in theaters alone. That's opening weekend. It got 78 million internationally, which really isn't bad. And then the surprising one is over 60 million for Disney premiere.
Wow.
Right.
So people who bought it at home.
Exactly. So they shelled out that $30 and 60 million, over 60 million. Now, Disney was the one that reported that, obviously, because they're the ones that see those numbers. And this is really the first time they've done that. And I'm not sure if that's because, it actually is doing well.
Right.
And I want to believe them. But, I mean, it's kind of it's their numbers. They could really say whatever it is.
Well, I think they're really good numbers. And what's so exciting is that things are still weird for people in the world. So going to a theater might not feel comfortable. So people are willing to kind of pay to see this great film. And I'm so happy to hear that so many people did. Whether or not those numbers are accurate, I don't know why Disney would necessarily make them up. They're Disney.
Yeah, it is also a Marvel movie, so people are going to see it regardless. And there's been tons of people through these months and pushbacks of this movie where people are like, I'm not even excited for it. I bet you still watched it.
Yeah. And why wouldn't they be excited for it? Just because it was taking so long?
No, I mean, because it is one of those things where this movie, she's getting her solo movie after she died. And it's also technically taking place in the past. So it's like, does this matter? Obviously. Marvel's always thinking about the next step. They tell the story and it's all setting up for the next thing. So of course people are going to see it. I was really excited to see it. Obviously, I wanted it to come out a lot sooner. Seeing this movie makes me believe there could have been a trilogy with her. Absolutely. Do I feel like some of it was rushed? Maybe a little bit, but it was good. But how did you feel about? So we saw it in theaters. The first movie in like 15 months that we saw in theaters. We sat there away from everybody with our masks on, super excited in IMAX, and it was such a good movie to like go back to theaters. The last movie we saw was Onward, which was a good movie. But if I knew that that was the last one I was going to see in over a year, I probably wouldn't have picked it because it was on Disney Plus for free.
Yeah, we saw that sort of on a whim. It was like things were just starting to quiet down in the world. And
Whispers.
we were like, oh, what are we going to do? Like, oh, let's just go to the movies. What's playing at this theater down the block? Oh, we'll go see Onward. So it wasn't like something that we were like really geared up for and ready to see. It was kind of like, oh, let's just see it because it's available. This going back, though, we've been waiting for this for what, over a year now?
Right.
And so I felt like we were ready and raring to go. And I'm so happy that it was as good as it was.
Yeah, there's something about seeing. I'm fine being at home watching a movie. We've watched plenty of movies over quarantine that were supposed to come out in theaters, but were on HBO Max or Disney Plus, and it was fine. Like I'm cool seeing it in theaters, but there's something about a Marvel movie and going in that theater with all the energy, people cheering, people like holding their breath for things, people getting excited, you know. So it's that experience. Some of my fondest movie going experiences have always 100% been with Marvel movies or superhero movies.
And I like what you said about the energy because it was, it was full. And then looking around, you can sort of see like light cosplay, people in hoodies, people in t-shirts, just wearing their pride because everybody was so excited.
Right.
So you're amongst fellow fans, which is always nice. Like we're sort of all in this together. We can't wait for this. And that energy is something that you can feel. It's electric when you're sitting in the theater. Now, I will say we did keep our masks on the entire time. So there was no popcorn.
No.
Which is a great thing that I love at the movies. But I was willing to give it up for the safety of myself.
I'm more of a Sour Patch guy, but I actually don't really like popcorn that much. So,
guys, comment below. Popcorn or Sour Patch? Which one are you doing?
Whatever. You're going to have people turn against me. I know most people like popcorn. Whatever.
We're going to get a lot of people that are like, you know how you take your popcorn up a level? When you put like M&Ms in it or Bunch of Crunch or something like that.
Ew.
Which is delicious.
No.
So delicious.
Anyway. So this movie. So this is actually it's not the first female-led superhero movie with the MCU, but it is the first solo-directed female superhero by a woman.
Bam.
Great. So Kate Shortland is the director of it. It was written by Jack Schaefer and Ned Benson. And if Jack Schaefer sounds familiar, it's because of WandaVision.
WandaVision.
They penned the entire WandaVision series, so I think that's really cool. And I'm interested because since this came out after WandaVision, it would have been interesting to see like their writing in that and then going to WandaVision. Either way, both ways, excited because it's like, oh, they have the writing chops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So Black Widow is a prequel of sorts because it takes place in between two movies that have already previously been released.
Who's confused? Me.
So it takes place between Captain America Civil War that came out in 2016 and Avengers Infinity War that came out in 2018. And there were movies that came out in between them, but remember in Captain America Civil War, the Sokovia Accords, Team Cap, Team Iron Man butted heads. Team Cap is the one that's pretty much they're fugitives. And Black Widow helped both teams. So by the end of it, she was a fugitive as well.
And at this point, a bunch of them are in the raft, right? While she's living this storyline.
Right, exactly. So that it did make for an interesting take on what she was doing during that time, because there was a gap of time for our original team.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were going to do a prequel, it would either have to be way before the Avengers even happened, or in this missing time gap,
Right.
really.
Right. And it's sort of interesting to think that like there are these time gaps in these Marvel movies, and now with more movies and now their Disney Plus series, they're filling those gaps,
Mhm.
right? Like what happened to the Loki that disappeared with the Tesseract, and now where was Black Widow when they were all on the raft? So these things that we might have questioned, they're now filling in the pieces for us, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it does. I think I mentioned this. I can't remember obviously which episode that I had mentioned, but I do get concerned with how confusing it will get, because, and I'm not saying like, first time viewers or somebody that's going to start watching these is going to be completely lost
Mm.
in even watching Loki or watching this Black Widow movie, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I think with the multiverse of madness coming and things getting absolutely chaotic,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you have to watch 24 movies and now 3 TV shows.
Right. Right.
catch
Well,
up.
it's funny because when Noah and I first started talking and started dating, in order to impress him, I wanted to make sure that I knew all of the Marvel movies.
Uh-huh.
So I watched them all from the beginning, and it was a big undertaking. Like I went to all my friends who I knew I watched them. I'm like, what order do I watch them in? How do I do this? And they were just like lovely and kind and helping me plot it out because I knew I had to impress a guy. So it was a lot. I had to set aside so many Saturdays to watch these movies, which were enjoyable, but it was a
Uh-huh.
lot.
Uh-huh. I feel like he's still placating when he says that.
What do you mean?
I mean, it's fine.
But I'm sticking up for the people that you're talking about
Yeah.
now who might want to jump into the MCU and now have loads more to watch.
yeah.
Because I'm still even lost and I've watched everything.
Yeah. I mean, but it does happen. I mean, that's why, like, we kind of were doing this podcast to begin with, because it's fun to talk about it and to dissect it and analyze it and be like, oh, yeah, that thing happened 10 years ago and now it's being brought up now.
Mhm.
So it's really interesting. So how did your general thoughts of the movie? Like, how did you feel about it? What were you, when you left the theater or, after you watched it?
Oh, when we left the theater, your boy was hyped.
Yeah.
I was like karate chopping and kicking. Like it was so good. The action was fantastic. The world building, great. It stood on its own. I feel like you could watch this on its own and not need to know where it takes place in the
Almost,
MCU.
yeah.
I love the new characters that they introduced. I really think they fleshed out Black Widow, and she was stellar in it. I thought the introduction of Yelena was fantastic. You fell in love with her immediately. I just thought overall it was totally kick-ass, pretty grounding, and had some emotional scenes in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to echo that. I mean, I feel really the same way about a lot of it. I do have some, not issues, but, curiosities on why they did some things.
Mm-hmm.
So, the general plot of the movie, it picks up in 1995, where we find out that, young Natasha and Yelena aren't really sisters, and their parents really aren't their parents. They're undercover Russian agents in Ohio, of all
Right.
places. And it's really just to get SHIELD intel. They've been planted there. They've been there for 3 years. And I want to say they did this really well, because I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a surrogate family situation
Mhm.
or it was actually their family. I was
Right.
like, wait, how did they turn into the Red Guardian? And what? And then when you find out, there's like, oh, it was all a game and they all were in on it. It's like,
Mhm.
there's something real fucked up happening here.
Yeah.
And then even with the opening credits of it, I was like, this reminds me of either a true crime documentary or like
Mhm.
a Jason Bourne movie, like a spy movie.
Yeah.
And that's what I was hoping for with this movie, because Captain America, the Winter Soldier is the high standard for Marvel movies, as far as it's very story driven. It's very emotional. It's so action packed. It's pretty close to a perfect superhero movie without it being like just a CGI mess,
Right.
So I was hoping that this movie would get up there, and I personally feel like it did. It hit all the same. There's a lot of parallels with the two movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, spy movies and having like the gritty up close action where it's not a CGI mess
No.
really does movies favors, especially with these type of almost street level type characters where they're not super overly powerful.
Right. No one's flying. Nobody has laser beams coming out of their heads. It's a lot of hand-to-hand combat, and the fight choreo in this was out of control. Good.
Exactly.
I do want to say something about those opening scenes. First, the actress that played young Natasha is actually Mila Jovovich's daughter,
Right. And
which is crazy.
now that you say it, I see it.
The face,
Right.
right? You can totally see it in her features. You're like, oh, that makes total sense. And the little girl that plays little Yelena played Flora in The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Listen to episode 2 of the podcast. We covered the entire
That's right, season
show.
2. Mm-hmm. And I did have one bone to pick about this 95 flashback. So I'm not sure if many of you know this, but I was a My Little Pony fan in my younger days. And I'm not talking like brony. I'm talking about like OG 80s and 90s My Little Pony.
I think they're just now finding this out.
All right,
Yeah.
so this is brand new info. I had a little duffel bag with Megan on it and Applejack, and I carried all my ponies in it.
Megan with 2 N's?
Megan, no, not that Megan. Although, let's do it. So there is a My Little Pony in this opening scene. So they do things really well, right? Like DuckTales is playing on the TV.
Right.
The fashion is very 90s. Like his glasses are perfect. Now this My Little Pony that little Yelena is holding, right, looks very much like Twilight Sparkle from the new My Little Pony series,
Jeez.
which is from the 2000s. So I'm a little upset that chronologically that might not be the right My Little Pony. I'm just saying is all I'm saying.
Let's just say that this is maybe just an alternate timeline because of Loki and you know.
So now we're saying multiverse of madness. Okay, I got you. She said, no, this ain't the sacred timeline, bro. Got it. Okay.
But after the initial like opening scene and it, you know, taking place, credit rolls, we come to 2016 and we're at, you know, quote unquote present day Romanoff being a fugitive for violating the Sokovia Accords, and that's where really this entire movie takes place. And her whole thing is escaping Thaddeus Ross, the guy that, you know, delivered the Sokovia Accords. But as we find out, thanks to Yelena and an amazing Budapest scene, that the Black Widow initiative or, you know, group are still in operation.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like they're being brainwashed or mind controlled
Mm-hmm.
in a way, which we see when she gets that antidote on her.
Right.
So that's really where the catalyst of the story happens. Yelena sends Natasha the cure, Taskmaster attacks, story unfolds.
That was one of my favorite scenes when Natasha first comes in contact with Taskmaster. Because it's like they kind of trick you. She's sort of in this hideout, this sort of trailer. She needs more propane for her tank or gasoline.
Thanks to Mason.
Right. Mason gave her that faulty tank. So she's driving very quietly on this bridge out of nowhere. It's like, bam! She gets knocked off. And you're like, what's happening? And then Taskmaster shows up fighting like Captain America with that shield.
Swinging like Spider-Man.
Then ends up copying Black Widow. It's wild. The truck is on the edge of the bridge. What's going to happen? It was chef's kiss. I loved it.
Yeah, it was a really good like introduction to Taskmaster for Black Widow. So Taskmaster. Let's talk about Taskmaster a little bit.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of talk about the reveal of Taskmaster a little bit later. But I was so excited for Taskmaster to be in the MCU because it's such an interesting concept for a villain. They have photo reflexes. They can mimic the person that they're fighting. In this one, it's changed a little bit where they program a chip inside of them. So it's more of a bionic situation. But in the comics, it's Tony Masters, and it's a person that just has this ability. They claim they've had it since childhood, and that's what they do. They're a mercenary, and they've trained, you know, people like other villains, goons, to fight the heroes because they know how to fight like them.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept. Do I really care if it was super comic accurate? No, because the things for me personally that were in there that made it cool were there. Fighting just like those heroes, having all that equipment, having, you know, Hawkeye's bow, Captain America's shield, got swords, all of that.
Like the Black Panther claws.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cool. And I did feel like there wasn't like the villains in this weren't muddied. Like there wasn't too many, there wasn't too little. And I think overall what this movie was trying to do was not only say goodbye or at least like a send-off for Natasha Romanoff and Scarlett Johansson, but also introduce kind of the passing of the baton with Florence Pugh. She was so amazing in this movie, but to me, it felt like too amazing. Because this is Natasha's movie, and Florence and this character stole every single scene.
Oh, absolutely.
That they were in. And we did see more sides to Natasha before, because we never saw her really sit with anything. We never saw her have like, you know, just everyday pleasures or anything like that. We saw, you know, some of her like true sides and like her human sides, especially during Endgame when she was talking to Steve with the peanut butter sandwich. And, you know, we saw that stuff, but we really never got to see her, you know, just be a person. And we saw that a little bit when she was watching that movie and she was quoting every line from it. So it's like, oh, she does have a favorite movie that she can quote.
Yeah. Black Widow's favorite pastime, a way to just chill out, is to say verbatim 007 movies. But I think that there's sort of a point to it, though. I feel like in their lives, even from that little scene we saw of them in 1995, Natasha knew what was going on. So she was in on the secret. She knew the seriousness of it all.
Right.
Whereas young Yelena was kind of just living this life. And she got to be a little more carefree than Natasha ever got to be.
Yeah, she was definitely older. And right from the beginning, she had to take control of that plane and save her, you know, quote unquote family, and especially her sister.
Right.
Even though if she didn't want to. But she knew the whole situation was fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, it's not normal.
She still cared for them. These are still people she lived with. They were like her closest roommates, the only people that she could really confide in, the only people that knew the life that she was living.
Right.
So I think that even you mentioned it before, that Black Widow has always been sort of stoic and grounded, and I don't want to say one note, but one level as far as her emotions are concerned.
Yeah, she's definitely, and I don't want that to come across as like saying she's not a good character or she has no depth or anything like that. Yeah,
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I think that Yelena is the opposite of that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So those two characters get to play off each other, where Natasha's a little more serious and Yelena gets to be a little more bubbly.
Right.
You know? So, but I agree. I mean, you kind of fell in love with Yelena in this movie.
Yeah, and I think that was the intention. I believe the writer Benson, they had worked on Thor Ragnarok as far as writing. So, I mean, the Marvel quips, but it's really smart in this one. I don't think it's as cheesy as a lot of the earlier Marvel movies are. And they do play really well. Even when, you know, they first come in contact with each other in Budapest and they have that whole fighting scene in that kitchen, which, by the way, was also just absolutely amazing, because the amazing part about that scene was you could see that they weren't sure about each other, because they're like, are they actually trying to kill me? Are they not? But it was also like sisters fighting.
Absolutely.
Where they kind of like fucked with each other when they were fighting. So it was like, it was so good, the chemistry between the two. And I think that's why I'm so sad that if this is the last time we see Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, that it was so good. I've always liked Black Widow, but I love Black Widow now. And that's where I'm like, is this really the end for her, when this feels like the peak for her? We still need to go, you know, we need a little more.
and I feel like really in this movie, you got to see how smart she is. You got to see how strong she is. I mean, we've known these things about her and we've seen it, but she got to fight so much. She got to outwit so much. You know, she just killed it on every level, that I left like, although I was satiated, I wanted more.
Yeah.
You know, and I still do want more, because she's such an amazing character.
Yeah.
And like you said, she's always just been a B character in any of the movies she's been. She's always been the second role, the supporting cast.
Yeah. I mean, she's come such a far, far away from her first introduction in Iron Man 2, from being, you know, the hair just does not look great.
The hair.
Right. And it's the, you know, the very tight suits and stuff like that. And, you know, kind of the explanation with her character in the comics and in the MCU was she does that by choice. So that was kind of the, like, I do it by choice so that way I'm unassuming and people won't know that I can literally murder them with a paperclip. And I get that, but it's like, I'm glad that this transition, even over the 10 years, even though she wasn't the focus, she has grown
Mm-hmm.
and she left all of that Black Widow and the Red Room behind,
Mm-hmm.
and she became who she was. And then it was weird to see her send off of her as a full character prior to her death. But I do want to say that thinking back on Endgame and knowing what we know now, it makes me appreciate her so much more.
And I feel like in looking at Endgame, you know, when we see her give her own life in that moment, we kind of see in this movie that she got to come to terms with a lot of the stuff that she did.
And especially with her family.
Absolutely.
Her, surrogate family, which I still feel like she feels like is her family.
Absolutely.
Right.
Definitely. And I think that's sort of one of the main arcs in this movie, or one of the main themes, is this found family.
Right.
And how they really were family, even though they were thrown into this situation together. She really did see them as a mother figure, a father figure, and a sister.
Even though she didn't really want to admit it at first when they all finally met up. And I think in the story with bringing them together, it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those things where like, okay, well, you don't know where the Red Room is because we want to destroy it. So let's go find Dad. Dad doesn't know where the Red Room is. So let's go talk to Mom.
I think that we also need to point out the reason Noah said ew when I mentioned that she was romantically linked to the Red Guardian is because he's basically her father in this.
Yeah.
But in the comics, they were married.
Yeah.
Hello.
It's gross now.
It's so gross.
But I do want to say that like David Harbour as Red Guardian, he was great.
Oh,
he was
totally.
so good. I would have never thought that that's what this character would be. This, reminiscing.
It's like
of,
washed up.
Yeah,
you know?
He reminisces about the glory days of being the Red Guardian, and he's in prison because his employer wanted to put him there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just he ate it up. He really did.
One thing we were missing in the comics, his main weapon was a belt buckle
Yeah,
that he threw and then would clap back on with magnets.
I don't miss it. It's fine. You don't need it.
In this, he was just super strong.
Right.
Yeah, which is fine. I guess we didn't need the belt buckle, but I sure did love it when I was reading it in comics.
Yeah, he was the Russian super soldier, essentially. And I think that is cool that we're just now, finding out about all these people with super strength everywhere.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of like when there's a metal involved, it's vibranium. When there's everlasting life and strength, it's the serum.
Yeah. Well,
That's
yeah,
how it rolls.
exactly. Now, okay. So how did you feel about Rachel Weisz's character, Melina?
So this character I thought was interesting, right? So in the 1995 flashback, we see her struggling with the fact that they have to leave this life that they've made.
Right.
It's become comfortable for her, and
She has kids.
She has kids,
Life.
and you can tell that she liked it.
Mm-hmm.
You had to go back to that reality of being a spy.
Well, they also can't have kids as a Black Widow.
You're right.
So I'm sure at some capacity she was like, "Oh, maybe I finally can?" Question mark.
So that was really sad. She disappears for a while. We come to see that she was really the brains of it all, right? So she was the brains, he was the brawn. I thought the character had some good twists and turns. I wanted it to be fleshed out a little bit more.
I do feel like out of, let's say, the 4 family members, she didn't get the most screen time or the most depth.
Yeah.
She killed every single scene she was in. I just feel like, rightfully so, we should have spent the most time with Natasha, and especially with Yelena, because she's going to be in the MCU going forward. And then I did feel like David Harbour, Red Guardian, got quite a bit of screen time, especially with the breaking him out of jail scene.
That was a big part of the movie. That was a good chunk of it.
Right. But, once we got to Rachel Weisz and her weird, farm area where she's experimenting on pigs. Which, animal cruelty.
Guys, if you're sensitive to animal harm and just pigs, there was a scene that I did not appreciate. And I really appreciated, though, that Natasha was on my side because she was like, stop it.
Yeah.
But don't trust anybody with a tablet and some pigs because it's not going to go well.
But I think that's it shows to what the point of that character was. In the comics, and I feel like every time I say in the comics, I feel like a weird, man.
He does push his glasses up on the bridge of his nose.
I can't help that by the time I get to that, my glasses are falling down. But her character in the comics is Iron Maiden, so she is a bigger character and she's a villain to Black Widow. So I did think it was interesting that they made this character a mother figure and ended up helping her. But when we get to her in the movie, this is really where they have time. They literally sit down for dinner and they have time to like hash out everything. And one of the most heartbreaking things and what gives this movie so much heart and emotion is how Yelena thought her life was before she was taken away and became a Black Widow.
Right.
You know, she, even just thinking about it, I'm like, she killed that role. I mean, if you've seen Midsommar, you know that she can kill a dramatic role. And in this part, when she was like, no, it was real. My childhood was real. You loved me. I loved you. Like, what are you talking about? And you have Melina kind of being like, it was part of the job. And even Natasha was like, it wasn't real. So she's in denial, obviously. Melina lost her kids.
Right.
Even though, you know, she wasn't able to have kids. She got kids and then she lost them again. And then she's done all these terrible things over the years. So I think they're all just living in this weird denial. Like,
oh, yeah. It's total self-defense.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree. And so it was funny. A lot through this movie, I kept waiting for like these very heartwarming family scenes. And they didn't come because of this very thing of them being programmed to have to stop themselves from feeling these emotions in order to survive.
Yeah. And we get these tiny itty bitty glimpses of, you know, when they're not trying to kill each other or running away from, you know, the agents of the Red Room or anything like that. You know, when Natasha and Yelena are on their way to go get Alexei, we get that probably one of the most funniest freaking scenes in the MCU where she comments on why Black Widow does her Black Widow superhero landing. And she like calls her a poser and she's in the middle of like that gas station mimicking it. And just the delivery of it is so good. But we see that. I mean, I have siblings. Derek has siblings. Anybody with siblings knows that you always pick on them. It's like you can't help it. It's just in your nature to like pick at them.
Yes.
And
why
that's
you do
the perfect,
this?
yeah.
With your head, you do this. Why?
You look like a poser.
You're a poser. You're so stupid. You're so stupid. Oh my God, it was hilarious.
It's so funny. But then we also see that, you know, Yelena seems like, you know, a daddy's girl almost. And that scene with Red Guardian coming into the room after she gets that, you know, confirmation that it wasn't a real family. He comforts her with singing the song that she loved.
Yeah.
Proving that they're all fucking liars and they love each other and they were a family.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So we do see those moments and I think it gives the movie more depth because it was action scene after action scene, but then we get these small quiet moments that you need in the movie for us to give a fuck.
Well, I feel like I'm always saying this in some way or another, is that sort of the beauty of these Marvel films is that they give you the high stakes action, but then they also give you the emotional depth. You know, it gives you the anchor to feeling I really care about these characters and oh yeah, they're fucking superheroes. That's amazing too.
Right.
And I agree with you. If we didn't have that other half of it, it wouldn't feel as effective.
It'd be super fun to watch.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
But we know that through these fights, they're getting to an emotional end.
Right.
And that's what we really care about.
Exactly. This, the dude that runs the Red Room that's been running in secret, Dreykov, I think they casted him well and he really was okay as the villain. Like there was nothing special about him. He was a gross person. He was a misogynist. He was a manipulator, an abuser, a murderer, everything that you can think of. He deserves everything that he gets. But again, we've kind of seen this in the MCU before. We've seen it, you know, this very powerful person has this very powerful thing that they hide behind. And it was an interesting counter to Black Widow because, you know, throughout the whole movie, we see her fighting other Black Widow agents. We see her fighting Taskmaster. We see her fighting, you know, other task force with the Red Room, you know, the foot soldiers or whatever. And it was just an interesting contrast with that because by the time we get to the third act, it's a very monologue heavy, you know, final fight almost. And then it picks up with the whole Red Room being destroyed.
Right. I mean, something that I think is interesting is that this is the man who's caused Black Widow's entire life to go through the events that it went through.
And she thought he was dead.
And we're just meeting him now.
Yeah.
You know, we're literally just meeting him now. And so we have to sort of learn in these like very monologue heavy scenes about why he did what he did and how he took control of her.
Right. And all of these women and
Right.
multiple.
Because basically what he does is that he finds forgotten girls and then he brainwashes them and makes them widows.
Yeah, girls nobody would miss.
Right.
Which was, I mean, it was upsetting to find out the fate of Black Widow's mother, that she actually wasn't dead or didn't really leave her, like abandon her, that she was kind of there and then they killed her.
Right.
And buried her underneath a cherry blossom tree.
Yeah.
You know, so that was upsetting. And, you know, it gives more, again, depth to Black Widow that we haven't got for 10 years. We hear this stuff in passing. And when we finally found out that the thing that really defected her from, you know, going that route or being a Black Widow after she escaped was when the collateral damage of killing Dreykov's child, Antonia.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, would be enough for most people to be like, okay, I think that this isn't great. And she tried to play it off. And it just kept building and kept growing on her. And she tried, that's what she's been atoning for this entire time. It's not all the other people that she killed that may have deserved it. It was the child that
The innocent.
she herself said was collateral damage.
Yeah.
So she's in denial.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though, right? Is that Black Widow had her childhood stolen from her by this man. And she basically had to steal someone else's childhood from them to stop him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that it feels like she really can't live with.
Right.
That she did to someone what was done to her.
Yeah. I feel like this, I mean, I really wish we could see more. I don't know if that's like, I don't actually want to see it, but I wish we would have seen more of what happened after they got taken and her going
As
through
kids,
the Red Room.
yeah.
Right. Because we still, I mean, we get the gist of what happens in the Red Room. Like, you know, they're brainwashed and they're trained, but part of me feels like because we didn't get that, that's such an integral part to this character that's what feels rushed to me a little bit. It's like, oh, we never did a Black Widow movie and she was one of the founding members of the MCU, that we should do it, but we're going to kind of skip a little bit over her origin story a little, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think they did well. If the intention was people will get the Red Room, we're not going to do that. Because one, it probably would be upsetting to see kids put in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did do it well. But if this was a show, super effective. If this was a trilogy, could have sat with some of the heavier stuff or the character developy stuff a little more.
I really want more of the Natasha Yelena show.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not even like, well, we could do a prequel, because the thing is that before this, Yelena is a brainwashed widow.
Right, yeah.
So we wouldn't
met
be able
up.
to have them fighting together.
Exactly.
It's like we got this one movie and that's all we'll get. When together they make such a fantastic team and a great fighting pair, it's just like a travesty that we don't get to see that more.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah, I do want to say, you know, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie was probably the very end, like the fight scene with Black Widow. You know, the whole Red Room's being destroyed. It's in free fall. She has to get a parachute to Yelena while also fighting Taskmaster. I thought it was really cool. Yes, it was CGI heavy, but the stakes were there.
Yeah.
It was really adrenaline heavy. And I was here for it. I was here for the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I think they do a lot of good sort of twists and turns. You know, they make you think one thing and then another thing happens. You think there's deceit, there's betrayal, and then it flips. And it's really good what they do. And
they fooled me twice.
100%.
Sure.
Same.
Yeah.
And then in those last moments, there was a piece of me that thought, oh, crap. This is not going to end how I thought it was going to end. You know, and then they are skydiving, base jumping. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but
sky fighting,
going through an engine. Like, what is happening? Things are exploding. Taskmasters. I'm having such a hard time saying Taskmaster
because you want to say mask.
I see if say Taskmaster. Taskmaster. It's that second K.
Yeah.
Well, the first K. There's only one K. Anyway.
Oh, there is only one K.
There's only one K. I just keep leaving it out. Taskmaster. Sorry.
So speaking of the name that we can't say,
I keep adding a second K.
I want to. I know a lot of people were upset with the reveal of Taskmaster, I personally really liked it, and it gave more to the narrative of Black Widow in the Red Room and how disgusting and horrible that whole thing is. And I don't want to say Taskmaster was the villain of this movie. They were a victim.
They were a weapon, yeah. A person who was weaponized, sort of.
Yeah. Victim of this. I think that, like, whatever notion you had or hoped to see Taskmaster, it's a different one. And they've done it before in the MCU a little bit, and they've changed some things. And I do feel like this is probably one of the biggest departures of the MCU as far as, like, oh no, Mandarin. The first Mandarin in Iron Man was probably, the
bait and switch of them all.
Yeah, I would say it's like Mandarin, Malekith from Thor the Dark World, and then probably Taskmaster. But I liked Taskmaster a lot with what they did. And I can't say that it's bad because it made sense almost.
You know, I think what's so interesting is that, like, when you look at the comic book origins of these characters, the MCU really isn't playing by that book.
No.
Even when we look at the David Harbour character and the White's character, they're not who they are in the comics.
No.
You know what I mean? So for there to be this departure of who the Taskmaster reveal is, it seems kind of like in tow with it. They're using some of these subplot characters to help drive the force of our main stars.
Right. And it's not to say that we won't see Taskmaster again. You know, this could just be the first Taskmaster, and then somebody picks it up later. Who knows, really? I mean, we could get Tony Masters later on in the MCU, but I feel like with what this story was doing and Natasha literally coming face to face with the thing that she regretted and tried to atone for the entire time, and it wasn't really gone, and she was able to say sorry and get some sort of redemption for it. I mean, that's great. I mean, because if it was just taking down the Red Room, I don't think that's enough. With what we saw, it just gave more to the character. And if this is the last time we see her, she kind of needed that. It just happened to be Taskmaster.
Right, right. You know, and even just talking about like the last time we see her, I really felt like they let us live in this moment of this final shot of her, this like 360 shot. She just completed this mission, and her hair sort of blowing in the wind, and we're getting the full, like, this is Black Widow.
Right.
And it's like our send off to saying goodbye to her. And it was incredible.
Yeah. And to find out, you know, the jump between like the last two big Avenger movies with, you know, Black Widow having blonde hair, and why did she have blonde hair? Nobody really knew. And, you know, she kept it in, and in Endgame, you see it kind of, her hair grew out, but she still had that white hair. Yelena has blonde hair. We also see that the many-pocketed, coveted vest, the first thing that Yelena ever bought for herself with her own money, she gave it to Black Widow, and that's the vest she wore in the last two movies and ultimately when she died. And it seems to me like, was Yelena blipped? And that's maybe why she dyed her hair? Or was it to pay respect to Yelena? Or did she escape from General Ross eventually and she dyed her hair?
But if you think about it, though, Noah, we see Black Widow after everybody's blipped. You know, I mean, she's distraught, like many of them are. But now there's even more of the depth in thinking that this person that she just rediscovered in her life, that she finally got to see again and be sisters with again, also disappeared.
Right. Well, you know, come to think about it, she did have blonde hair in Infinity War, so she had it prior to the blip. So interesting. But I mean, and we know why she has the blonde hair. Yelena has blonde hair, and it's like, you know, I feel like she did it to pay respect to her. And also she wore her vest.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think that is the really cool thing about doing this prior to the movie or this taking place, because that vest now means so much more.
Right.
When before, I did not even notice the vest.
Yeah. And what's sort of great about this is that they both have a give and take, right? So Natasha makes fun of Yelena for this vest, but then ultimately accepts it at the end. And Yelena makes fun of Natasha for the Black Widow pose and then ultimately accepts it in the end.
I do, yeah.
You know,
and
they
I do
both
like,
take that thing from each other.
I do like how when she did it, she was like, bleh.
I know,
Don't like it.
but she did it so flawlessly, folks. Tens across the board.
Yeah, she did. I mean, of course she would. So we got to talk about the mid and post credit scenes of this movie because we got two, and that's another thing that I really missed with the Marvel movies. And you know, of course, this was setting up the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it takes place in the past, it's setting up for things that we have yet to experience, which is really cool. In the mid-credit scene, 2 weeks later after the fallout or the end of the movie, Natasha reunites with Mason, the guy that's been supplying the thing, was potentially a romantic interest, but nothing ever really happened that way because it's just not what the movie was about.
Right.
And he supplies her with the Quinjet, which becomes essential in the Avenger movies later on, and that's how they end up getting to Scotland to save Wanda and Vision in Infinity War. So it really, that was like, oh, okay, that's how you got it. You did escape from Ross. That makes sense now. And then after that, the post-credit scene, the very literal, very, very end of this, we get a really, I want to say touching, but could have been more. We see Yelena at Natasha's grave, and it's under a cherry blossom tree. So we can assume that either they're paying respect to Natasha's mother, or they actually found where the mother's buried.
And we do sort of see that this is a memorial as well. Not only is it her grave, but you see people go there, they leave flowers, they leave trinkets. It's her grave, and she's being honored there.
Yeah, it was touching to see. And does it make up for her not getting a funeral in Endgame? No. Personally, I mean, I don't even think this movie makes up for her not even really getting even a floating wreath with Tony, but it was still touching to see. But who shows up than none other than Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, played by none other than Mary Louise Dreyfus.
Nope. Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Mary Julie Dreyfus.
Marcia Gay Harden.
Guys, this, again, we're recording in a hotel room where I hear people walking around, and we love you guys. I'm tired.
No, he's falling apart.
But you know who I'm talking about.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
We're talking about Selena Meyer. We're talking about Elaine.
Yes.
But she
old
shows
Christine.
up. Right, old Christine. She shows up. And the interesting thing was this was supposed to happen prior to Falcon and Winter Soldier. Do we still know who she is? Not at all. But seeing that she's assigning Yelena and she works for her in some capacity, and she tells her who killed, quote unquote, Natasha, now we can assume what might be happening in the Hawkeye TV show. Which, okay, I'm going to be honest, I was excited for Haley Steinfeld. I was excited for Echo.
Totes.
But I'm more excited because Yelena's most definitely probably going to be in it.
Okay, listen to me. Y'all coming in here telling me that the baton is going to be passed. I'm like, this is bitching. Yelena's going to be the new Black Widow. But in this cutscene, she's like working for freaking Allegra de Fontaine. Guess who else working for Allegra de Fontaine? Your boy John Walker.
But yeah.
U.S. agent.
When does it take place? I'm assuming it would take place after Falcon and Winter Soldier, so maybe we'll see U.S. agent. I still don't know what incapacity, what Madam Hydra's doing. It can't be good.
I know, but I don't want them on the same team. I hate US agent.
Yeah. Why do you say it like that?
Because sometimes it's U.S. agent and sometimes it's U.S. agent. So I just put it together. US agent.
Oh my God.
Because I don't like him. So he doesn't have, I don't want to respect him by saying his name correctly.
But it will be interesting to see what capacity. I feel like she might eventually be on the good side, or we're just not going to get a new Black Widow, and we're going to get this maybe anti-hero-y type character. But I think people need to keep in mind, we don't know what Hawkeye's doing after all this. Like post Thanos and Endgame, we really don't know what he's doing. So we've seen him go down a dark path before, and Black Widow is the one that kind of reined him back in. We don't know.
True.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see what lines people cross and where it goes from there. But I'm glad we got a taste of what's possibly going to be happening. And they really kept it under wraps that Yelena, or Florence Pugh, is going to be further in the MCU and possibly in Hawkeye.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we covered a lot of it. You know, I hope that this helped you gather your thoughts about this movie. We wanted to release it a little later, not just because we were traveling. I'm not making that excuse. We could have recorded it earlier, but we since it's a movie, we want to give people a little time to watch it. And you know,
and I hope you do see this, because it was, I just really loved it.
I mean, if you got through this entire hour or so of us talking about it and you haven't seen the movie, you should probably go watch it anyway.
Yeah, because you guys are gonna be sitting there being like, oh, they nailed it on those themes, you guys. They really knew what they're talking about.
So if you were to rate this out of 5 spiders, how many spiders would you rate it, or would you squish a few of them?
Oh, no. I would give it 5 out of 5 spiders.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
High
Okay.
flying female amazing action. Listen, Sailor Moon, hello. Chun-Li, hello. My favorites, Black Widow. Yes.
I don't know what that has to do with each other, but I get it.
Strong female heroes.
No, I get it. I'm kidding.
Guys, oh my God.
I would say 4.5.
Oh,
And that half is only because it came out after she died.
we're fighting. We're fighting right
That's
now.
all. That's the only reason. But other than that, this movie is now in my top 5 of favorite Marvel movies. Immediately, halfway through that movie, I was like, "This movie's amazing."
Oh,
it's so good.
yeah, and Nick got me. Like, I'm telling you, there were times in this where I like audibly was like, "Oh, whoa!" Like,
Yeah.
just so good. Yeah, in the middle of the theater.
He was doing that. The only person in the most quiet of moments.
Because they get you with the explosions and the crashes.
All right. Well, that's it for us. Let us know what you thought about Black Widow.
Please.
Please let us know. Comment below. Or just, DM us, message us on Discord,
Comment.
whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to A Bite of, artwork and editing by our own Noah. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at A Bite of Pod and on Facebook at A Bite of. If you have questions, recommendations, or just want to say hi, you can email us at abiteofpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all podcast platforms. Please be sure to rate and review to spread the word. Hope you join us next time on A Bite of. Bye.